G'day folks, and welcome to this playthrough of Scenario 2 Lasso from Tinian, the Forgotten Battle, part of the company scale system. Now, this basically takes place from the end of the first scenario. It uses the historical setup, so the Americans have established their beachhead around that Jig Day beachhead line. The Japanese defences are in position, and this commences at 0500 hours on the 25th of July 1944. To give you a sense of what has happened, the bulk of the 4th Marine Division have landed and they've been in this defensive position along the perimeter. The Japanese historically launched this counterattack at night, which was just an absolute disaster for the Japanese, considerably weakening their forces for the rest of their campaign. But with this setup, they have this decent defense perimeter. You'll notice they're all allowed to be in foxholes. Some of them are set up in pillboxes. I even have a unit in a cave down here. Now, before I go into this, there's something to keep in mind about this scenario, and in fact the broader battle as a whole, and that is that this is hugely lopsided. The Americans have overwhelming superiority. It's all but inevitable that the Japanese will lose control of the island. The Americans, this is widely regarded as one of the most successful amphibious invasions of the Second World War in terms of the relatively low number of American casualties. The Japanese, of course, refuse to surrender and put up a fight, and in effect, in most of these scenarios in the full battle, they're determined to cause as many American casualties as possible. And this is a great example of game design that addresses that imbalance of forces and the different objectives. So the victory conditions are all oriented around the Japanese player eliminating American units, routing American units, and where possible remaining on the board, with Mount Lasso being an objective as well, kind of to direct American attention. So it is feasible for the Japanese to be completely defeated in battle, but to win the scenario based on these the damage they inflict on Americans and basically just surviving if they can. Other scenarios sort of track a victory in a similar way. It's not necessarily about controlling the island or controlling key objectives, although that's part of it. For the Japanese, it's mainly about elimination of hurting the Americans, and for the Americans, it's about preventing that damage whilst getting the job done. So the Americans have a superiority of special weapons. They have elements of the 2nd Marine Division coming on throughout the day. You can see the first, I think, companies getting ready. These are the first wave of reinforcements, which will come onto the transport zone in that first turn. So, how are we going to get this done? Well, I think I'll try and exploit this gap here. There's a few weak Japanese units. They're not weak, are they? They're quite strong. These guys are weak. Maybe try and move around the hill here, take out this artillery, and come around behind the Japanese positions. This is quite strongly defended. Their firepower isn't great, but do keep in mind that they are in rough terrain, which I think is a -2 modifier, with the foxholes, and there's several companies stacked in these hexes. So it could be tough to crack. I'm thinking, in this scenario, I'm already thinking more carefully about my indirect fire. I've tried to stack my mortars together to help with those assaults. You may recall when I played Scenario 1, I really struggled to get those modifiers up for the American assault. So by stacking several mortars together, they can add, I think, +2 to those assault modifiers. Trying to keep the formation separate, keeping the leaders sort of in the mix, so they can sort of provide support. These companies out here will probably fan out to the south as these groups advance up Mount Lasso. It's not far to go. There's only really 1, 2, 3 hexes, and they do have 2 days to achieve this. It's a case of doing so without losing too many casualties, without becoming routed and whilst also sort of reducing the ability of the Japanese to hit back. It was though that Japanese indirect fire that really secured them the win in that first scenario. So I'm mindful of that, and I'm going to be much more careful. The scenario starts with the 4th Marine Division chit active. So the Americans will get, I guess, first strike at the Japanese, and I'll report back soon and give you updates on how things are going. So here is the situation at the end of the first turn. It is just at the end of the 0500 turn on the 25th of July, and well, I think I've learned those lessons. The Americans are doing pretty well. They have, what have they done? They have really focused a lot of attention on this hex here. They've increased their disorganization level. First it went up to 3, they rallied back down to 2, and some more attacks, brought it back up to 4, and they're suppressed under heavy barrage with a prepared assault ready to go. You can see the concentrated fire there on those American units. They have, how did they get rid of this unit here? I think this may have been an airstrike on this Japanese unit at the top here, which caused some pretty heavy hits. I think they rolled a 6 for an airstrike, causing 4 DG and an R result, and they failed their route check and are now in the routed unit box. And on a subsequent activation, the last direct command, these guys tried to move forward. In fact, we did have a unit over here tried to move along. They were subject to opportunity fire from here, and the Americans failed their route check. So that forced me to bring this unit up from there. Couple of do we have some? No, they're okay. Some disorganization here and there. The Japanese have rallied from a lot of that since it was inflicted upon them. Moving around, a lot of concentrated fire, which didn't do a lot of damage, and any damage that was done, the Japanese have rallied from. There was that gap there, of course. The Japanese moved across to occupy it. There was another route over here that was this unit from the Navy. They also suffered some pretty big hits, disorganization. This may have been another airstrike, I think, and are off the board. So a bit of a gap here in the Japanese lines. What I'm trying to do here with this formation is just put some pressure on the Japanese. Ideally, if I can force them back, it frees maybe up some of this formation to move down, and this is the focus of my attention in this area here. This assault out on the left is ready to go. So the next time these guys are activated, they'll assault this hex. Yeah, just slowly but surely. No American losses, just that one routed company that was subject to opportunity fire. That was pretty unlucky. I'm being very cautious, as I mentioned earlier, with this formation because their headquarters isn't yet on the board. We do have HQ there, another HQ up there. But again, it's still early. It is just on 0700. I'll report back later. So it's now the end of the 0700 turn. The wind marker was the last marker drawn, so I thought I'd leave the barrage markers on there, show you what's been happening just before removing them. So you can see a lot of activity out here on the far left. The assault went very well here by the Americans. Prepared assault, they assaulted, they eliminated the Japanese unit, and they've kind of been forced back a little bit. Actually, yeah, the assault was here, I think, and this unit was kind of surrounded, so they pulled back to reform the line. Japanese artillery hitting with some smoke here. I'll show you these two hexes in just a moment. Doing a lot of damage here, and along this area of the line here. You can see some of their heavier artillery doing some medium and heavy barrages sort of out on the far right, just to soften up those Americans and deter their attempts to advance. Still this artillery holding out here on the left, just one level of disorganization. You can see this formation in column begin to move through this gap. These guys are also in column. They've just advanced into this area. The Japanese have pretty much pulled back. You can see their support weapons, a heavy machine gun, a leader, just one disorganization. So pretty strong hex there. I think the American advance is going pretty well. They're making, I mean, this is Mount Lasso here again, and they've kind of advanced 500 meters within the first 2 hours without suffering any casualties. The Japanese, in fact, have lost 2 companies, one from the army, one from the navy. The Americans have had 2 routed units from this formation, from various effects. You can see a lot of suppression and disorganization among these units. They really need to rally. Disorganization 4 and suppressed as well. And I think disorganized 3 and either pinned or suppressed. Yeah, suppressed as well. So a lot of artillery fire along here. They're within range of these. Some of them can be struck by these Japanese guns out here. And some more disorganization 2 and pinned. So these guys along the line here have been suffering from, I guess, some very good rolls. I will say that. There are some strong, I mean, you've got some weak naval units out here. These guys are hitting, I think they've got 2 zeros, and they're a strength 1 or firepower 1 unit. But then you've got this unit here, which is firepower 4. I've given them the heavy machine gun with a leader and concentrated fire. So they're hitting quite nicely. And what this is doing is it's, I guess I said, deterring the Americans from being able to push out here and swing around. But as it is, most of the American efforts thus far have been on the far left. What else? Airstrikes this hour, this turn rather, were pretty unsuccessful. I don't think they did any damage. So yeah, advances on the left, Japanese artillery causing some damage here and infantry here, and the Japanese reforming their line. But you can see the Americans with a lot of space to potentially move around, and some very weak Japanese companies. This is what the Independent Vehicle Company desperately holding out on the far left flank. They do have some strong support just to their right. 4, 5, 6 firepower -1 maybe, if they can rally, push it up to 7. But yeah, the Americans, the 4th Marine Division, are really struggling with their direct command and dispatch points. They have been rolling really badly. They didn't get 3, they only got 1 dispatch point this turn. Minimum direct command points, so hoping to make up for that in future turns. Okay, so it's in the 0900 turn, we're just on 11 o'clock, and the US 4th Marine Division has sort of broken this left flank of the Japanese line. You can see destroyed this unit here, eliminated it, and they pulled around here up onto the heights. This unit has made it just adjacent to Mount Lasso. That's their objective here. But we also have this unit here, and they're suppressed, and I think on 3 disorganization. The rest of the line's doing okay, but they are just pretty much holding in their foxholes. So things are going really good for the Americans, and well, I can't really explain it. They've obviously got their support weapons and their leaders. This has been the one formation that I've really been activating. I haven't been able to afford the dispatch points for any of the others, so you can still see they've got these concentrated markers on. They've still got pretty high levels of disorganization. So there is a risk there that some of these could easily become eliminated. I mean, this stack here, they've won sort of bad artillery hit from several eliminations, and they just have not been able to activate at the same time. The Japanese, certainly over the last turn, haven't been doing any damage along the line here. You can see the barrage marker here, trying to inflict some hits. So I'm not sure what the Japanese can do out here on the left. If they pull back from the line here, it'll just give this other formation the space to move around. If they pull back their naval forces along here, it then exposes their artillery out on the right. And these are the ones doing a lot of damage here. These sort of 5 units out here. So I don't know what the Japanese answer is. There are no Japanese reinforcements coming. This is it. And there's this wave of just American troops companies come up this road and then around the back of the hill. You can even see some of those 2nd Marine Division forces which have landed and marched under a direct command. More coming in on the landing beaches. So things aren't looking good for the Japanese. And again, it's still morning. And they've also built up, and they're not only adjacent, they've built up 2 demoralization points next to this headquarters unit up on the hill. So they're in a lot of trouble. And I'm not sure if I have any immediate answers for the Japanese. Yeah, more and more waves of these marine companies coming on. The Japanese really don't have the support weapons. I mean, these guys, they're in foxholes. They're in this rocky terrain, which provides a -2 defense modifier. That's in addition to, well, many of them have a -1 modifier. So there's these -4 modifiers to any of these. Much of this American fire against the hexes, but yeah, they're very rapidly building up the disorganization levels and then eliminating or routing. So at present there are 3 eliminated Japanese units and 2 routed units. That's, yeah, and that's mostly from around this area. I think there was 1 or 2 around here, 3 from the Imperial Army. Alright, so that brings us to the end of the 0900, just on the 11 AM turn. And here's the situation at the end of the 1100 turn. So we're just on 1 PM, and well, you can see the advances the Americans have made around here. The Japanese have really tightened their defensive ring around, well, near Mount Lasso. It's technically this hex here that the Americans are trying to capture. They have well, 2 disorganization levels. That should be Japanese, not American. Counter. But there we go. And they've also pulled back some of their forces. You can see these companies here were along this area. They've also started to pull back some of the naval forces from the north. It may be too late. Maybe they should have done this earlier. Really pulled back and defended that sort of western flank of the mountain, the hills, because this is basically the path the Americans have taken to get this area. You can see those medium tank support weapons. There's some more here. What else? Yeah, basically the Americans putting all their pressure around this area. The Japanese did have a good turn, to be fair. I think they eliminated 3 American companies in this turn. I pointed this out earlier, this area around here. Once these disorganization levels start to build up, they become very vulnerable. And the Japanese kept focusing their fire in those areas and eliminated, well, a unit from here, and I think 2 units from here before the Americans could rally and recover that disorganization. So yeah, they've lost 3 companies, which gives the Japanese at least 6 victory points, and yeah, denies the Americans that major American victory. Now the pressure's on though, and the Americans not only need to capture this hill, they're looking also at eliminating these Japanese units, because for every Japanese unit on the board at the end of the game, the Japanese score 2 victory points. So it's capturing the heights and also mopping up those Japanese defenders. Having said that, we're only 4 turns down out of, well, we're halfway through the first day in a 48-hour scenario. So yeah, certainly the Americans are going to capture this objective probably on the next turn, if not the turn after. And then, what are they going to do next? We can wrap around and cut off their line of retreat and slowly condense upon those Japanese Imperial naval units up here in the north. They're all pretty weak, to be fair. But the Americans are still struggling with a lack of dispatch points. Now that the 2nd Marine Division has started to arrive, we get a sort of second force to help with this. Now I started to divert these guys. You can see them out in the far left. I was bringing them around as well. I may shift their attention to this gap in the centre, and they can drive against the Imperial Navy and they'll have the job of sort of mopping up in the north whilst these 4th Marine Division formations take care of the remnants of these units out in the south. You can see these guys haven't activated, I think, since the first turn. Just that lack of dispatch points means I haven't been able to buy their formation. The 4th Division has 1 dispatch point, no direct commands, whereas 2nd Marine Division in much better shape. So, that brings us to the 1300 turn, halfway through the first day, and I'll report back later on how things go. Okay, so here's the situation in the 1300 turn, just at the start of the 1500 turn, and Americans starting to get a little bit worried. They lost another company out, I think it was here, due to Japanese artillery, again just that disorganised level building up, and they're not having the dispatch points to recover. They are, of course, spending direct commands whenever they can, but they're down to 1 4th Marine Division, down to 1 direct command point. We also had a bit of a build-up on the beach. The amphibious support chip, amphibious movement chip came out pretty early before the direct command, before I had an opportunity to clear the beaches, and so there was a massive pile up on the beaches, a big stack of units, 2 different formations in both spaces, I think, which just caused a lot of layers of disorganisation. So you can see all these units here struggling to move into space because this formation hasn't moved at all, and so it's hard to move out here. You can see some of these new arrivals from the 2nd Marine Division just kind of moving south into some open area, trying to recover that disorganisation that they've suffered. There was a big fight down here on Mount Lasso. The Americans eliminated the last Japanese company, 2 companies actually, defending in that area. Then they marched in, but because they were in column to move in there, they were then quite vulnerable, and the Japanese threw some artillery at them, and what else? There was a big fight here, basically, and the Americans routed. Yes. So they've got one of those companies in the routed box, and then the Japanese have really moved in to reinforce it with some pretty strong, 2 strong companies, as you can see there, with special weapons and Captain Matsuda, who gives a good troop quality, firepower bonus. The Americans responded with some more, I think this is maybe naval support, barrages, trying to do the same thing up here in the north to push the Japanese in. You can see the tight ring the Japanese have now formed around Mount Lasso, just to defend those heights. Now that second rout of an American unit, each rout caused by the Japanese is worth 1 victory point. And in addition to the other casualties they've caused, is enough to guarantee them a minor victory. Now, the scenario doesn't end here though, it continues. Basically this reflects the Americans in this situation suffering far greater than historical casualties. And gives the Japanese kind of a victory in a sense. But the fighting continues. The Americans are still trying to secure the island, and so I'll continue with the scenario and play it out. So whilst technically the Japanese will win, and the Americans can still kind of achieve their broader objectives in this battle. What else is happening? Elements of the sort of 2nd Marine Division you can see moving down to the south here. Just there's some Japanese artillery just off the map down here to the south, so they're moving to take on them, whilst other elements of the 2nd Marine are going to move through this gap here, as I mentioned earlier. But yeah, the 4th Marine Division is really struggling with dispatch points. They're still sitting on 1 dispatch point, so not enough to. They've really struggled with these rolls. They can't afford their division activation. They've just been relying on really the 1 formation, really relying very heavily on this formation to do all the work, and none of the others have done anything. which has been frustrating for the Americans. But having said that, these guys have really done well to get the job done. Yeah, they have now lost, though, 4 companies. And just to kind of push the camera forward and look at the situation up here, some of these hexes have level 4 disorganization. So one Japanese hit here will kill a company. I mean, I said at the start of the scenario, the Americans really need to watch those Japanese spotters and that Japanese artillery. And they didn't do it. They focused so much on capturing Mount Lasso, and were feeling so optimistic. And I was worried how the Japanese are going to defend this. Well, looking carefully at those victory conditions, they don't really need to. They just need to cause those casualties to the Americans, and that's what they've done. To kind of, I guess the effect here is to demoralize the Americans. Yeah, I mean, the American losses, the American company losses now are equal to the Japanese company losses. It's 4 each, with 2 routed Japanese units, 1 routed American unit. So yeah, that's the end of the 1300 turn, heading into the 1500. 2 more daylight turns left on this first day. Alright, the Americans survived through another turn. It's the end of the 1500 turn, heading into the last daylight turn of the first day. But not a lot of combat taking place. A lot of the American actions have been spent with rallying and moving. There's a heap of congestion around this area as the 2nd Marine Division arrives. They're just hitting the against the back of the 4th Marine Division, particularly this yellow formation out here on the right. And they're trying to get through into open space, basically. You can see this formation here. They've kind of moved through along this road, rallying where they can, more rallying behind here, rallying from those pretty high disorganization levels that we saw earlier. I had to spy, so luckily the 4th Marine Division finally rolled well for dispatch points and purchased the first formation using 2 dispatch points. So when they finally get dispatch points, they have to do a sort of an emergency expenditure to rally these units along the front here to bring their disorganization levels down, to prevent them, well, to try to save them from being hit. What the Americans need to do now is eliminate all remaining Japanese units, every single Japanese unit on the map by the end of this second day. Way down the south, we do have some of these elements here are pushing against these Japanese artillery pieces. Didn't roll too well this turn, but they may improve. And yeah, you can see elements of the 2nd Marine Division beginning to move against the Japanese artillery in the rear. I'm at the point now where, for the most part, I'm playing the rules correctly. There may be 1 or 2 things I'm getting wrong, but nothing that I'm really noticing. I'm feeling pretty confident that I have the rules understood and playing correctly, but I'm figuring out the tactics and the importance of keeping disorganization levels down low, and the importance of not letting them just hang. This is a bad situation here. Avoiding that where possible, which means spending direct commands, buying formations we need to save those units. Because once they hit disorganization level 4, if it's a stack, every point of disorganization just kills a unit, basically. It's the easiest way for the Americans, or for the Japanese, to kill those American units, those American companies. So yeah, trying to avoid it. Heading to the last daylight turn, which is the 1700 turn shortly. So at the end of the 1700 turn, the last daylight turn of the first day of this scenario, the 25th of July, the Americans have done pretty well. They have cleared out a lot of the Imperial naval defenders from around here, some important guns from here with that white firepower value, putting some pressure on the remaining 2 Japanese pillboxes near the airfield, in good defensive positions here. So these are going to be tough to crack. Just the 1 infantry out here, and then the 2 artillery pieces. And yeah, you can see this big space opening around here. In fact, Japanese unit here, Japanese unit here. So a big gap for these Americans to begin to move through. Down in the far south, those two companies have eliminated one of these artillery pieces. In fact, to be fair, that was they both failed their direct firepower role. They had to bring in some artillery, I think maybe naval support to finish off that unit, hence the heavy barrage. These guys still left over here in their foxholes. This artillery unit out on the beach still standing. I mean, these guys haven't moved all day. You can see disorganisation on that marine company there. A lot of pressure on the Japanese around here. Two disorganisation points here. A Japanese hero appeared in this hex. You can see how big this is. They are really defending the mountaintop here, the peak. And putting a lot of pressure on the Americans. You can see disorganisation level 3 here. They're pinned. Some other disorganisation has arisen and been rallied from. You can see 1 here, 2 here. A lot of rallying from these Americans. As I said in the last turn, they're spending a lot of direct actions to either move off the beaches or rally from disorganisation. You can see the 2nd Marine Division pushing through here in sort of a line, trying to use that road, trying to avoid stacks with disorganisation, because of course disorganisation is contagious. So if you move through this, you catch that same level of disorganisation, which is a real pain in the backside. You have to then rally from it twice in effect. The beaches are still pretty crowded. Still some 4th Marine Division units up here. This is a big stack of artillery, which I've intentionally placed together to try and help with assaults. I didn't want to spend too much time around here prior to the night turn, because I figured the Japanese could just rally during the night turn. So it's been pretty quiet here for the last 2 turns, actually. A lot of the work being done out here to clear the airfield area. And of course, having this company here, let me just bring it up to the north here, having this company here restricts the fire range, I think, of this indirect artillery. So you can see a couple of these tank support weapons coming out. Medium tank here, some more down the south. The Japanese also starting to use some support weapons in places. Down here, they've got a nice couple of support weapons helping with counterfire. The Japanese aren't. One of the things I've noticed is that the Americans are using their concentrated fire. The Japanese are trying not to do so, because this gives them the opportunity to opportunity fire then on the Americans as they move around. The Americans are doing a lot more movement than the Japanese, and the Japanese want to be able to fire on those, opportunity fire on those moving Americans. So they're less inclined to place concentrated fire markers. What else has been happening? Look, I've been really lucky with air support throughout the day. The Americans, for all the air support ships drawn, so 4, 5, 6, 7 air support rolls being made, only one of these resulted in a 0. No air support markers. Everything else gave me at least 1 up to a maximum of 2. I haven't received any 3s yet. The naval support has been pretty powerful and effective. Certainly the Saipan artillery parks have been very ineffective, because I've, as with the last scenario, just haven't been using them. I do have these command points I can spend to use them. It hasn't been happening. No excuse really. I could if I wanted to, but haven't. I think the fact that they're so far off in the southeast corner of this map, they're kind of out of sight, out of mind. You can see divisional trucks getting those artillery around. What else? I did in the last turn forget to place reinforcements, I think, or the turn before. So I've caught up with that and everything's okay. All right, we're about to head into the night turns, and I'll report back. So here's the situation at the end of the first night turn on the 25th of July. Again, the Americans doing a little bit of damage to the Japanese. A couple of little incremental points of disorganisation here and there. A few up on the hill here. You can see 2 disorganisation and suppressed. And yeah, 1 level there. The event was a Japanese bonsai charge from here, which they were forced to do, which they lost, and thus lost the unit. So they're down to just 4 hexes on the heights, plus this cave over here. Night turn opportunity to recover from disorganisation, so you can see a lot of those have been cleared up. A lot of the units around the beaches there, which were a mess, are down to just 1 now. And a lot of those units from the 2nd Marine Division have pushed through. You can see formation out here and this yellow formation beginning to move out to the right, just to clean up, I guess, the remnants of the Imperial Navy. That's going to be the job for the second day. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units left out here. I think they may have eliminated one this turn or the turn before. There's still 1 artillery piece way down the south, and this one out here on the coast. This is really the main stronghold of the Japanese up on Mount Lasso. What else happened? Yeah, otherwise pretty quiet. We had a formation here, activation here. From this formation, that was needed because they needed to recover from suppression. But whilst there, they also launched some attacks along the line. We had this formation active and this formation active, and again just sort of moving up, as I said. Otherwise, yeah, pretty quiet. Units recovering from fatigue, and yeah, not much else happening. So the second night turn was pretty quiet, not a lot happening, but we did have several formation activations. The 23rd Regiment around here, again, trying to keep the pressure on this hex. So disorganisation level is 2. It did go down, I think, and then they brought it back up again because the Japanese are also trying to rally as much as possible. And I think they've rallied over here as well. But here, some very interesting developments. We also activated the 8th Regiment formation activation. I mean, they're penalised by night. I think it's -2 to their fire modifier, and this is a bunker, a pillbox, sorry. Where's their terrain counter? It's all the way under here. A pillbox. So -3 terrain modifier, +2 troop quality, but the Americans got 2 very good rolls with these stacks. And this is some dense stacks here with a lot of support weapons and leadership. And they managed to first build up cohesion to level 2, and then the second attack build up to level 4, cause a suppression result, and put the hex on fire. So, in fact, both attacks put the hex on fire. So the first attack put the hex on fire, and the second attack had the same result. Doesn't change anything. So this is now on fire. And what this means is that next time this Japanese unit activates, they have to leave the hex or they automatically rout. And this is a stationary gun, so they'll have to convert to infantry and leave that hex or they rout. So it's a good result for the Americans. It's exactly what they wanted in that area, as it is anyway. They're about to rout anyway, or be eliminated. In fact, it may be better for them to rout because they may stand a chance of coming back. Having said that, yeah, the headquarters is currently off the map. So that was a good little result for the Americans in this area. Otherwise, everything pretty quiet during this night turn. That's the end of the day, and we're about to head into the 0500 turn on the 26th of July. Okay, it's the start of a new day, the 26th of July 1944. We've just run through the first turn 0500. This includes rolling for weather, and well, my first roll was a tropical storm, which cancels the entire day if it's part of the campaign. So I figured this didn't apply to smaller scenarios, otherwise the game would be over. So I re-rolled. Rolled another tropical storm. This requires a 9 or more. So I re-rolled and rolled rain. So pretty bad news for the Americans. This is a -1 firepower modifier to all attacks. Definitely affects the Americans more than the Japanese. Limits visibility, I think, to 3 hexes. And it's just going to make things just a little bit more. All these fire attacks they're making are going to be penalised even further. By now, though, you can see they've built up some pretty heavy firepower stacks. 1, 2, 3 companies with their support weapons and leaders. So they're really bringing almost close to maximum firepower against these Japanese. The first turn went pretty well. We eliminated this hex out here, which had that. It was on fire. The rain puts the fire out, and so they had to attack this hex to destroy that last unit. Some more pressure now being built over here on the right. Bit of disorganization being built up. 2 disorganization levels here. They keep suppressing and disorganizing this stack here. It's now at 2. They keep rallying from that. This hex here currently, well, another hero arose in this hex. Have they recovered? No, 2 disorganization. The Americans keep suppressing these hexes. The Japanese keep rallying from that. And so this kind of battle between trying to build up these disorganization levels to eliminate these units and the Japanese trying to rally very quickly. The Americans kick things off with both of their division activations. So moving a lot of their force, you can see this encircling of Mount Lasso, encircling of the airfield area, and just begin to push out. There are only about 8 Japanese units left. 2 of them are isolated. So we have this unit up in the top left up here, and another unit down the very far south. And there's 2. They recently lost their support weapons. Trying to attack this artillery down here. You can see the beaches there. The new wave starting to come in. Those boats stop overnight, so there were no landings overnight. You can see the artillery stacks here. These are designed to help with those assaults. We've got a prepared assault taking place here, and another prepared assault taking place here. So I figured first day was pretty quiet for assaults. So the Americans have decided to kick things off with. They've basically, I think. I don't like the idea of half-hearted assaults. My thinking is, if I'm going to do an assault, I want to go in with maximum strength, maximum odds ratio, maximum support. So I'm trying to bring a lot of units to these assaults. Now that all these units are focused around these areas, it's more practical to do that. So you can see 2nd Marine Division out on the right here, 4th Marine Division out on the left. With this element of the 24th Regiment out on the far right. They haven't moved far from their starting positions. I don't think these guys have moved at all, this stack here, from their starting positions. We've had a kind of a run of bad firepower rolls where a couple of support weapons have been lost. This places them in the reallocating support weapons box, and then there's a bit of a delay before they can become available again. So a lot of these units, particularly around here, have lost their support weapons, but they'll be coming out pretty quickly. And we do have a lot of support weapons, including some tanks, both light and medium tanks, flamethrower tanks. I don't know what these are. These folks. There's some stuff we can bring out to help with those assaults and attacks and so forth. Not assaults, but the attacks. All right, so we're about to head into the 0700 turn. And so here is the situation at the end of the 0700 turn. You can see the Americans gradually pushing in on the Japanese. They've captured another hex here through that assault. They made an assault here, which failed, and the Americans suffered some disorganization, but they followed it up with some direct fire and got a series of good rolls, 2 zeros in a row, which rapidly built up the disorganization and eliminated the last Japanese defender around the airfield. So we now have 2 artillery pieces out here defending desperately, rallying as hard as they can. We have this big stack here on Mount Lasso with 3 units, but they are disorganized, level 3. These 2 units are pretty healthy, but I think there's only one, or actually there's 2 units here, 1 unit here. Then we have the big artillery piece out here, and another piece way down in the south, which is still in good health. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Japanese units left. And the Americans have 5 daylight turns left to do it. more divisional activations coming out to try and get as many of these units active as possible. I mean, yeah, the Americans are doing well. I feel like things are going well. They're rolling well. They're eliminating these Japanese units. The 2nd Marine Division here should be able to take out these 2 pieces. I'm worried about the 4th Marine Division out here on the left. There's really only 2 formations out here. The 23rd Regiment and the 25th Regiment, with the 24th way up here. So, yeah, they may need to pack their bags and get going. I'll report back soon. Okay, at the end of the 0900 turn, if you're struggling to find the Japanese units, it's because the Americans had a cracker of a turn. They've cleared now Mount Lasso. Just a series of very good rolls, building up that. The old disorganisation levels were already pretty high, and they just finished them off. Once it gets to that level, they just really needed a string of good activations, and they got their direct command with the formation activation. This 23rd Regiment back to back to not give the Japanese a chance to recover and rally, and very quickly swamped the area. They're now shifting down. There's one more artillery piece down in the bottom. When I say artillery, they are of course on their in-column side. And then they eliminated this unit up here. This cave was sealed on the earlier turn. I didn't point that out, but they locked the Japanese in there. So, and then there's this unit up here, which again is artillery, which has been forced into column. They're in some decent terrain, and they do have their leaders with them. They're in foxholes, but you've got basically an entire division heading for this one company. So I'm almost certain that there's probably 1 turn left. If I just come down a little bit, you can see that last unit down here, also in company. So yeah, I mean, I'll play through this last turn, and then it shouldn't take long. Then I'll wrap this up. Okay, so midway through the 1100 turn, the final Japanese unit was eliminated. The last unit up here was also eliminated during this turn. Which brings the scenario to an end. This, great scenario. And as I said earlier, I played most of the rules correctly. Probably there was only one little mistake that I made, and that was I failed to flip some of the artillery over to their in-column side, which actually helped the Japanese, because they kept firing on those adjacent units with their deployed side rather than their in-column side, which gave them a slight advantage over the Americans. I guess some of the key points to take from this: the Americans really struggled with dispatch rolls early. They rolled very highly during the preparation phase to gain new dispatch points. Because they didn't have enough dispatch points, they couldn't play their formation activations. And these are really important, particularly for that 4th Marine Division early on. Basically, I was only getting one. It was the 23rd Regiment, I think, activating early. And so the bulk of the pressure there was placed on the 23rd Regiment to attack Mount Lasso. They did pretty well, sweeping around the side there and outflanking the Japanese positions. The Japanese were slow to respond. They were thinking they'd just bunker down and not basically hold their position. The more they move, the more vulnerable they are to, well, not only opportunity fire, but artillery fire whilst in column and so forth. So they held their ground as much as possible, tried to hold this line. Eventually, the Americans broke through here as well. And by sort of midday afternoon on that first day, the 25th of July, they started to roll better for dispatch points, which gave them some more activations. By then, the 2nd Marine Division were beginning to arrive, and they had quite a few good dispatch rolls, so they were able to activate more frequently and push out around here, which they basically need. That was more to eliminate these Japanese units. The big attacks on Mount Lasso, I mean, the Americans captured Mount Lasso briefly on the first day and then lost it again. The Japanese really reinforced that with 3 companies. And then it was a big fight. It was a big struggle once the Japanese pulled all their forces back around to the heights. And then a couple of assaults they basically, you can see these big stacks down here. They basically focused their attention on getting big stacks of companies with support weapons and leaders, giving them some very powerful modifiers, which they needed. Keep in mind, this is a rain turn, so there's a -1 modifier to all these fire rolls. This is good terrain, -2 modifier, so that's at least -3 with the foxholes or caves or pillboxes. It's -4, -5, -6. Some other modifiers as well, like some disorganization amongst the Americans, which is, you know, -7 in some cases. So they really need these positive modifiers. Fortunately, I think for the most part, they rolled a lot of zeros, a lot of direct hits. Had a string of these towards the end here, which kind of helped them secure Mount Lasso. The other thing is, of course, with those dispatch points, they were able to combine formation activations with division activations with formation activations to keep that the pile up of disorganization levels rolling. And you need to maintain momentum. Once the Japanese start to accumulate disorganization levels, the Americans need to keep the pressure on and use that to eliminate these units before they can rally. And that's why at the end of the first day I saved my dispatch points. It was pretty quiet out here at the end of the first day as I was building up this 4th Marine Division dispatch points to let them activate sequentially. And it worked. It was a good plan. They were quiet on the end of the first day. By then they had the dispatch points to launch this big offensive on the morning of the second day. And I'm surprised actually how quickly these positions fell, particularly around here. They held out for so much of the first day, and then they kind of fell in quick succession on this second morning. Around here, looking to the north, things moved pretty easily. A lot of the Japanese guns were caught out in sort of bad defensive positions around here without great defense modifiers. Even this last unit out here, I think it had a foxhole maybe in a foxhole in this brush terrain. But again, when you look at these stacks, it's infantry 4, up to 5, up to 6, 7, 8, 9, I think. Minus perhaps 2 or 3 gives them a hit on a 6 or less. And that 2nd Marine Division has a lot of direct commands available to support their attack. So very enjoyable scenario. As I've said repeatedly, once I sort of understood the rules, it was then shifting my understanding to grasping the tactics. And I think midway through the first day, I had that understood and realised I needed to put a lot of emphasis on the Americans rallying, which I've done. So that is the end of scenario 2, which is called Lasso, ending on the morning of the 26th of July 1944. So as mentioned earlier, this it was destined to be a Japanese victory, and that was evident midway through the first day. As I said, I played it out, and yeah, it's still a minor Japanese victory. Once I realised how important it is to rally and reduce those disorganisation levels, the situation certainly changed. You can see how healthy all these American units are at the end of the game. What my mistake was to not worry about that disorganisation. I was so determined to capture Mount Lasso. I thought this was an important area to seize quickly, and I put all my effort into that 23rd Regiment formation, completely ignoring the 25th Regiment, and that was extremely costly. That basically lost the Americans the scenario based on suffering too many casualties. So, yeah, lesson learnt. This ends in a Japanese victory, but I think we can call it a sort of Pyrrhic victory because I don't think the Americans suffered I lied. They suffered one additional rout result over the last basically 24 hours. but no additional casualties since pretty much midday on that first day.